All right. If you have ever wanted to have somebody on that hates Gavin Newsom and can just trash talk him all the time, I've got the guest for you. I have Katie Zacharia to help me go through some of the biggest news stories. Katie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's fun to be on.
So, Katie is a political consultant. She works with large corporations. She goes on Fox News. She's a lawyer. She's just somebody that has her hands in so many different projects. I want to get your thoughts. You are working with people out there that are trying to flip California red. I personally believe California is significantly more red than most people would think. I believe there's a lot of sleepers. There's a lot of low propensity voters. There's also a lot of Republicans that have been brainwashed that Democrats always win, therefore my vote doesn't count. I want to dig into that. But first, what are your thoughts on these LA riots, this No King in America riots and rallies there around the country and in California?
Yeah, well, let's start with the No King in America. President Trump is no stranger to a dictatorship that basically spied on his campaign, hijacked an election in 2020, used the judicial system and weaponized it against him, their political opponent. And during the interim, decided to lock us all down and force us to wear masks. So we have, and that's just scratching the surface, right? And so we have a party that does not care about rule of law, and we had a president, quote president or Otto Penn, that didn't care about rule of law. And I'm sorry to tell you, that is not Donald J. Trump. That is Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. We're much more interested in a dictatorship than President Trump has ever been. So these No King protests are really just more of the Democrats a play on words, right? Some disgusting kind of deformation of reality or distortion of reality, right? And President Trump honoring the U.S. Army in their 250 years of existence is really trying to bring back and make the military great again, something that every single citizen in our country should be celebrating. And so these are disturbing protests, and they absolutely are not grounded, just like most of the other things Democrats do. They're not grounded in reality in the least.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Wasn't it the Democrat Party through Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and Chuck Schumer that tried to install Kamala Harris of California without getting a single vote? To me, that sounds like trying to crown somebody the president of America versus letting we, the people, vote in primaries, vote in the general election. Weren't they trying to make her a king or a queen?
Correct. They used the playbook with that. Biden won the primary, and then all of a sudden they decided to start realizing that he had some mental incapacitation issues, which President Trump had discussed well before 2020 and got a lot of heat from the press for talking about how his mental deterioration was so obvious, right? That he ran his campaign in the basement. He couldn't do a debate. This was all front and center and there for the taking if anyone wanted to look, including Jake Tapper, who's now decided he's going to look at reality again, right? But the Democrats decided to just install Kamala Harris as their candidate when they realized after President Trump completely, skewered Joe Biden in the debate. They were like, Joe Biden can't win this election. We got to throw Kamala Harris in. And so without any rule of law, without any process of doing so, they just put her right in. And they forgot to remind her that, she has a constitutional duty through the 25th Amendment, Section 4. The vice president should have invoked this Section 4 of the 25th Amendment when she realized that Biden was unfit to do the job. But they never went through the proper process. Again, this is what I said with the riots and with everything else. The Democrats are not concerned with rule of law. They're concerned with steamrolling opposition and inserting and installing their power and their initiatives. It's actually really hard to watch.
Yeah. Whatever they say Trump and the GOP are doing, they're actually doing. And this is just another example of that. President Trump was asked, are you the king of America? He said, I sure don't feel like a king. It's hard as hell to get anything done. A king would just do that. Also, you've got people all over the country using their freedom of speech to badmouth him. If he was a king, wouldn't he put his foot down? I mean, the fact that he's not a king says that they have the right to say these kind of things.
Correct. They're using their freedom of speech under the United States Constitution, right? Constitutional rights. And they're waving Mexican flags in the streets, a country that they have left and do not want to live in, and are now on our streets with that flag using, our Bill of Rights. And so President Trump is absolutely correct. He's not a king. And the Democrats trying to couch him as such, or say that his appreciation of the military, or his wanting to make America great again, or infuse business, or deport criminals, that these things are anything king-like, right? This is actually just initiating rule of law that they have not been participating in. And I think his deportation of illegal immigrants, they need to look. Barack Obama deported 3 million without one riot, right? Without one big issue, without a no king protest, and had no judicial pushback. He was able to deport 3 million illegal immigrants. And now President Trump is trying to do the same. And all of a sudden he's, this tyrant. It's again, more of the same from that party.
Yeah. Why do you think, as somebody in California, as somebody that studies and talks about politics, does consulting, why do you think Gavin Newsom was so upset about President Trump trying to keep Los Angeles safe? What was it? His ego? Was it the fact that President Trump had the stones to actually do what was right? Was he humiliated? Why did he push back so hard when it obviously saved Los Angeles from burning to the ground?
Yeah, burning to the ground again, because Gavin Newsom is responsible, right, for the $250 billion of damage from the wildfires that he was absolutely criminally negligent and not trying to prevent. And, President Trump, and I'll just highlight this and we'll go to the question. President Trump reminded Gavin in 2018 after the Paradise Fire that he needed to do deforestation measures and fill up the water reservoirs, or he would have a major catastrophe on his hands. And what came to light, right? Exactly what he said was going to happen. Now in 2025, the beginning of 25, we have this probably the largest, most expensive natural disaster in the history of the United States under Gavin Newsom's watch. And so why is Gavin upset at the president? Because the president actually does something. And this was not 2020. This was not the summer of love. It wasn't an election year where you had this weird pandemic kind of meeting protests, right? President Trump has an entire cabinet and governmental system that is behind him in what he's doing now. He doesn't have to fight tooth and nail. A lot of these people that were embedded in the administration prior, he can just call and say, we're going to federalize the National Guard and keep Los Angeles safe. And Gavin Newsom does not like to be shown up, right? This guy who's not down in LA trying to solve the problems. He's, up in Sacramento on his podcast. President Trump is a problem solver and a deal maker. And so he just said, I'm not going to let this happen again, and watch this, right? And so Gavin has pushed back at every turn with President Trump. Look, he wants to protect the sanctuary cities, and he earmarked $50 million in California for lawsuits against President Trump's policy to end sanctuary cities, which are a violation of federal law, by the way. And then he waged a lawsuit against President Trump against his tariffs. First of all, he did it in the wrong venue, and he got overruled. And now there's going to be an appeal. And now he has to go to bat with President Trump against his use of the National Guard. And the juxtaposition of, say, a governor like Greg Abbott, if this happened in Dallas, Greg Abbott would go use the National Guard on his own. He wouldn't need President Trump to intervene and put the National Guard on the ground if the situation became dire. So the level of violence was not too dissimilar to that of like Rodney King era. But Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, they sit by and interfere in what the president's trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. on the one hand, you have Democrats saying Trump is deporting all of these people. They're using the courts against him to slow it down. But Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, they all deported millions of people without all of these nationwide injunctions. On the MAGA side, you have people saying Trump's going too slow. We want even more people deported. It came out in the New York Post that 1 million illegal immigrants have self-deported under Trump's we'll give you a check to leave the country. And the result of that is in those areas where illegal immigrants have left, wages have gone up. I just wanted to highlight that because I don't even know that my own audience knows how many people have actually been deported despite all of the hurdles the Democrats, sanctuary cities, anti-Trump people, and these liberal judges have put in his way. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, President Trump is also up against Joe Biden under Biden's watch and the border czar Kamala Harris, right? They opened the gates, the floodgates, and a historical amount of illegal immigrants came caravanning, as we saw that footage over the southern border, caravanning into the United States. Illegal immigrants, criminals were coming from prisons out of Venezuela, right? Coming up to the United States. So what President Trump is having to do with deportations is actually, he has to go in historic margins because the historic law breaking of the illegal immigrants and really the administration, it was so high. And so to see President Trump make this pivot and fight against the weaponized judicial system and yet be this successful in his deportations, including, I think we have an all-time low. I think the historic low of, what is it, like 2 decades of border crossing is right now because of Tom Homan and because of President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security. And so the biggest hurdle that we have next is this bill needs to get passed. This bill, the big, beautiful bill through the Senate, we have an entire border wall that will be finished and secured for generations to come, right? We have 10,000 new ICE officers that will be added, 2,000 border patrol, and 3,000 customs agents. This is all to keep our country safe. If you cannot regulate your border and who is coming into your country, as has been said many times, you will not have a country. There are no countries that do not have borders and that have been able to, maintain themselves.
Yeah, no, it is beautiful. All of the different things that are in there for families, keeping these taxes low, lowering taxes in some areas. Of course, then you have some members of Congress that are saying, "Oh, this is going to be terrible for the middle class." How? Keeping more money in their pocket? Like, how does that make their finances worse?
Right, lower. I think these are historic. And they're historic tax cuts, and it goes alongside historically successful. I mean, nothing like this has ever been done in history with the tariffs. I think we're looking at a 2.8 trillion, towards our deficit based on the tariffs that all these Democrats are pushing back against. And reciprocal tariffs. Let's just visit that for a second. Reciprocal tariffs are so brilliant. It is that no other country is going to rip off the United States like they have been. That's the basis. And especially as it pertains to China, with his increase on the tariffs with China for the fentanyl precursor production and manufacturing, right? This to me is one of these points where the Democrats have not joined President Trump to say, we are against China's manufacturing of fentanyl precursors. And we want to actually support him on this initiative because fentanyl is actually killing our citizens. No, they still have to push back against his tariffs with China. And that just shows you that at the large expense of American security, the safety and health and welfare of American citizens, they will push back against President Trump regardless. It's crazy.
Yeah, anything he says, they just have to take an opposite position. With everything that's happening in the U.S. economy, it feels like we're walking on shaky ground. Prices are stuck at really high levels, and it seems like nothing is affordable anymore. It's no wonder many are relying on credit cards to cover the gaps. Credit card debt is skyrocketing, and it's leaving a lot of people stressed out. If you're a homeowner, you don't have to face this uncertainty alone. My friends at American Financing can help you take control. They can help you access the debt in your home to help you pay down the high interest credit card debt, giving you peace of mind and real saving. On average, people just like you are saving $800 a month. That's $10,000 a year. Plus, they may close your loan in as little as 10 days. Don't let the chaos of the economy get the best of you. Call American Financing now. It costs you nothing to get started, and you might be able to delay 2 mortgage payments, putting some extra cushion in your bank account. Give them a call at 888-686-8030 or visit americanfinancing.net/Gardner. Again, that's 888-686-8030. I don't know if you saw this or not, but Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida said that they're going to have George Soros and billionaire, this other billionaire, brought back to America. They want him to be forced to testify in Congress on how they were funding the Los Angeles riots, how they were using USAID money in order to fund the invasion of the United States. What are your thoughts on George Soros and Neville Sengi being brought in to testify to their behavior?
Absolutely. Well, if they start this, I think it's going to be a flood and waterfall of a lot of the other riots and things that we've seen in the past. And I'd love to go back in history as I look at what's happening now. This isn't these protests. This is not a novel or new way of trying to upend a country, right? And rip the fabric of a country apart. This is Marxism. And there's an ultimate agenda to first we saw this tearing apart of an appreciation of our founding fathers, right? That was kind of the bedrock of the Constitution is inherently racist. The founding fathers were terrible, and we saw all these statues come down. This doesn't originate out of just like, oh, we suddenly had this great idea. This is fundamentally rooted in Marxism. And to see people like this brought to answer for their behavior, for what they're funding, for what they're doing, really, it goes even bigger than that. What's the ultimate agenda in trying to destroy the fabric of the nation? Like, where are they trying to drive in communism, soft totalitarianism, right? Like, what's the agenda here? And when you look at with China, right, it's not that dissimilar to what they've done with our higher ed or our media. This kind of slow communist takeover with propaganda and otherwise to really disrupt the fabric of our society. And so I would love to see that. I would love more people to be called into question on that, including, all of China's communist leadership.
Yeah. Okay. Going back to California, I said at the top of the show, I think there's way more Republicans than most Americans outside of California would guess. I believe that there's a lot of low propensity voters. They've been convinced we just always go blue ever since Reagan. We're just a Democrat, state. But most people don't realize if you could make California go more and more red, you pick up so many electoral votes, so many seats in the House. I mean, you could pick up finally a Republican senator in a long time. What are your thoughts? Where is California really at when it comes to red and blue?
One of my favorite things that President Trump said, he was on with Dr. Phil, and I think the interview was taking place in Las Vegas, and it was a little bit sacrilegious, but I love it. He said to Dr. Phil, if Jesus Christ came down and counted the votes in California, I would win California. And honestly, that's the truth. And I really do believe that. And in a less sacrilegious way, what I've seen in California has been the fact that we don't have proof of citizenship to go vote. In fact, our Senate approved a bill that made it illegal to ask for voter ID at the ballot boxes, right? And when you go vote. We also have the 7-day voting window, which in the Fifth Circuit, RNC v. Wetzel, has been ruled unconstitutional. So when we see that on appeal, we'll see a lot of these voting windows, in my belief, go away, and it'll be 1 day of voting rather than this week-long holiday of voting, which is really wrought with uncertainty and should be under major scrutiny, considering how the election goes those 7 days following the election. And, it's often mostly skewered for Democrats. With California, so I love this statistic too. We have Florida, Texas, and then California in votes for Donald Trump. So in 2024, Florida was first, Texas was second, and then California came in third. And I know we have a very large populous state, but it's a reminder to people that we were the third state to deliver the largest number of votes for President Trump. He saw a 9 percentage vote swing. This is Kamala Harris's home state, right? So he saw a 9 percentage vote swing from 2020 to 2024. And what we're seeing is just this massive disruption to the Democrats thought that they could continue on with their failed policies and nobody would look until entire neighborhoods and cities were burned to the ground because of these policies, until kids were locked out of schools because they weren't vaccinated and weren't wearing masks, right? That we were told to stay in our houses. That Californians have for so long endured this terrible leadership, especially under Gavin Newsom, especially under Kamala Harris when she was Attorney General and DA of San Francisco. San Francisco no one would recognize that city for what it once was because of failed Democrat policies. So what we're seeing these unregistered conservatives, and what I'm a part of an initiative, and it was Ambassador Rick Grinnell who saw this, is what we're doing is we've targeted unregistered conservatives digitally. And this firm goes after all of these unregistered conservatives based on publicly available data and algorithms and all digital, and they target these people and get them off the sidelines to go register to vote so they can participate in the election. And I'm going to tell you something: 1.4 million unregistered conservatives were found in the first data dig, which is, it's unheard of. 1.4 million unregistered conservatives coming out and voting in, let's just even say 2026, we'd have a Republican governor. That with voter ID or proof of citizenship plus a 1-day voting, there is no chance a Democrat would survive if we had proof of citizenship and 1-day voting. There's just no chance. And that's why Kamala Harris, she won every single state that doesn't require voter ID. And if the Democrats know that their self-preservation tool is to prevent people from asking about voter ID, so they can keep flooding the country with people who are not registered to vote or are not citizens and shouldn't be voting, and then they can go vote in these elections and swing for the Democrats.
Okay, so this is kind of, let me put it to you this way. So Scott Pressler was out in Pennsylvania, boots on the ground with a team, and he helped it go from blue to red. It continues to go red as Trump does more and more for the country. So you guys are kind of doing a similar thing, but you're going at it digital boots on the ground first.
Well, look, the Democrats have been digital and the Republicans were analog for a very long time. The antiquated grandma standing outside of a grocery store asking people to register to vote, half of the people she's registering to vote are likely going to be Democrats. Motor voter, which is voting at registering to vote at the DMV. Half or more are going to be Democrats because either they don't know better or they're just registering and they click Democrat. And this is actually targeted voter registration. And Stacey Abrams was pretty successful with this in Georgia. It's why Georgia went from red to purple, is because she went digital. The reason Ohio and Florida went deep red was not just because of disaffected Republicans leaving California. Ron DeSantis and Rick Scott had a very targeted approach, which was to do digital voter registration and use the tools we have available that are digital to find people that are unregistered. So they're not in the voter database, but they're clearly conservative, right? There might be a registered gun owner, registered truck owner, be outspoken online about their distaste for, liberal policies, and then they register them to vote digitally. It's very simple. If you go search, I want a red tie, and then all of a sudden red ties are popping up on your ads on your email. This is essentially now it's just register to vote if you're unhappy about what's happening in your state.
Okay, interesting. I genuinely believe it's more red. I think you get rid of some of these programs that the Democrats have just dug in so deep, almost like cancer, like motor voter and voter ID stupidity, calling it racism, and like they've done a really good job of making inroads. But I think a lot of that can be undone. Another channel that I follow, Dr. Steve Turley, talked about how out in California they just did what Democrats did, which was ballot harvesting, but they did it through Christian churches.
Yeah.
And the areas that did that same exact strategy, they went red. So I know the people are out there. I'm just excited to see California go redder.
Well, you know what? The one thing that I see, and my family, my dad lives in Texas, friends in Florida, and I just spoke there at a little event right after Governor DeSantis spoke. I had the privilege of literally being right after him, which he teed it up perfectly because he also trashed Gavin Newsom very well. And the thing is that California conservatives are very, very eager. This is like, we are the battle torn, tired, really, really taking heat constantly, but have stayed, right? These are the people that are like, you can envision someone in the military that's just, like General Raisin Kane, for instance. I love President Trump's story about him, but it's like this kind of like you feel in California that you're just always at battle. You're at battle with the schools, you're at battle with the policies, you're in battle with the environmental groups, and I feel that people start to get complacent when they go to Texas, when they go to Florida. And that's what I said to people when I spoke to Florida. I'm like, you're only one election away from losing sanity, right? Like you don't just go to Florida and sit on the beach. You have to go to Florida and keep fighting. And if you don't keep fighting, the Democrats are always at war. The Democrats are going after Texas right now. The Democrats are going after Georgia right now. And we are not deploying these same strategies where it's like we look at a Democrat stronghold, like the Democrats going after Texas. No one would have seen that, a few years ago, but they're like, we're going to flip it. And conservatives in the same way should be going after California and should be going after these policies, because again, if you just hang on to one policy, if you get proof of citizenship, not just for federal elections, but for statewide elections, it's a game over for the Democrats.
Yeah. Oh gosh, wouldn't that be great? Katie, this has been a great discussion. You go on Fox News and you get invited to speak. I appreciate you coming on to my podcast. If people want to follow you online, where can I point them?
I'm on Instagram at Katie Zacharia, and I'm on Twitter or X as Katie Zacharia.
Okay, I'll put those. Final question. What do you think about Steve Hilton? Is he the guy to do it? Is it still too early? Are there other big Republican names that are going to come forward? What are your thoughts?
Well, you have the Democrat machine out here in California, and if you have a situation where Kamala Harris runs for governor, which they're toying with, and maybe you have Rick Caruso, who ran for mayor, re-registered from Republican to Democrat, ran for mayor of LA against Karen Bass and lost. And then you have a Steve Hilton or a Chad Bianco. I think it gets pretty tough. That's a tough race. It's tough because Kamala Harris, no matter what, is going to have the utter support of the Democrat Party. The DNC will come out in mass, and they will start the engine behind her, as we know how that works. They started it behind Karen Bass against another Democrat, Rick Caruso, in this mayoral race. They sent out Joe Biden, they sent out Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff. They sent everybody out to help Karen Bass beat Rick Caruso. And I think they're going to do the same. So it's my personal opinion that we will need to see a very prominent MAGA Trump affiliated figure that can go to bat with Kamala Harris and can really re-expose what President Trump did over the course of the 2024 election campaign. Just expose that Kamala Harris has nothing to stand on, that she's really not, and for all intents and purposes, an intelligent woman with intelligent policies that she can implement in California, and that California is in dire straits. So I would love if we get a Republican. I would also really like to see a major MAGA Trump circle person rise up and take the podium against Kamala.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Well, she was unfit to work at McDonald's and unfit to be president. But like you say, in California, they're not running against Kamala. They're running against billions of dollars of DNC money and manipulation and string polling. So it'll be really interesting. Katie, thank you so much for coming on. I'll put those links down below. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.